Hi, my name is Tim Wynn. I'm a professional parliamentarian, and that means I travel around the country helping organizations have better meetings. In my experience, members want two things in a meeting. They want their voices heard and their votes counted. And that is precisely the function of parliamentary law, which is concerned with preserving the rules and protecting the rights of members. The purpose of parliamentary law is to facilitate the smooth and orderly transaction of business in a meeting. At the end of the day, if the will of the assembly prevails within the boundaries of the rules, I know I've done my job. Most meetings are governed by over 700 pages of rules in parliamentary law, which I will now sum up in 3 minutes. Needless to say, this is not intended to be a thorough review of the rules, but merely a brief summary that merely skims the surface of parliamentary law. But I hope you'll find it helpful. I'll start with some of the basic rules of debate. The first rule is that only one member speaks at a time, and you must be recognized by the chair to speak. So, how does a member seek recognition? In a large meeting, a member rises or goes to a designated microphone stand and says, "Madam President," or "Mr. Chairman," as the case may be. The chair then recognizes the member by saying, "The chair recognizes the member," or "The chair recognizes the delegate at microphone 1," or "The chair recognizes Commissioner Johnson," whichever is most appropriate based on the size and nature of the meeting. In small boards and committees, members may raise a hand to be recognized, instead of standing or going to a microphone. But in any case, once recognized by the chair, the member has the exclusive right to be heard at that time. That means that no one can interrupt you to rebut what you're saying or to add their own comments to the debate. When a member is finished speaking in debate, that member sits back down, or in a small board or committee, that member might end his comments by saying, "Thank you, Madam President." Other members can then seek the floor and be recognized by the chair. And the chair must recognize any member who seeks the floor while entitled to it. Next, debate must be germane to the pending motion. So the motion comes first, then debate must be confined to the merits of that motion. This means that anything that is said in debate must relate to whether or not the pending motion should be adopted. It would not be in order to talk about another motion that came up earlier in the meeting, or a motion that's scheduled to come up later in the meeting. And comments on any other unrelated topic or issue are not in order, while this motion is immediately pending. Any comment on any other matter is simply idle discussion, which is a major hindrance to the transaction of business. Once debate is finished on the pending motion, it is put to a vote. Then the assembly moves to the next item of business, where debate will be in order on the next main motion placed before the assembly before it is put to a vote. Now let's take a quick look at how the rules of debate apply to an amendment. Whenever a main motion is made and seconded, the chair states the question on it, thereby placing it before the assembly for consideration. At that point, it is the immediately pending motion. It can then be debated by the members. If at some point a member makes an amendment to that motion, and if the amendment is seconded, the chair then places the amendment before the assembly for consideration, and the amendment becomes the immediately pending motion. So debate on the amendment is in order. However, debate on the main motion is not in order at this time, since debate must be confined to the amendment while it is the immediately pending motion. After debate on the amendment is finished, it is put to a vote, and then the main motion once again becomes the immediately pending motion. And once again, debate on the main motion is in order. Next, debate alternates between those in favor and those opposed. So the chair might say, "The last speaker spoke in favor of the motion. Would any member like to speak against the motion?" This practice of alternating back and forth keeps the debate balanced, but it can also save the assembly time. For example, if 15 members are prepared to speak in favor of a motion, they will tend to do just that if the chair simply continues to ask whether there is any debate, even if there are only 2 members who wish to speak against the motion. But if the chair alternates between those in favor and those against, then he will recognize a member to speak in favor, and when the member is finished speaking in debate, the chair will say, "The last speaker spoke in favor of the motion. Would any member like to speak against the motion?" The chair then recognizes a member to speak against, and when that member is finished speaking, the chair continues alternating in this fashion, asking each time for a member on the opposite side of the last speaker. Soon, the chair will say, "The last debate was in favor. Is there any debate against?" There will be no answer to the chair's call from the two members who already spoke against it, since a member cannot make a second speech on the same question the same day until every member who desires to speak on it has had an opportunity to do so once. This also means the members who have already spoken in favor of the motion cannot speak again until all those who wish to speak have had an opportunity to speak once. But in our example, there are many others who do wish to speak in favor, but none that wish to speak against. So, since there is no debate in opposition, the chair will say, "Is there any further debate in favor?" And after a few more speeches in support of the motion, with the chair calling for opposing debate after each turn and getting no response, those who had planned to speak in favor will discover that they don't all need to speak in support of the motion, since there doesn't seem to be considerable opposition, and this allows the Assembly to more quickly move to a vote. Now, to be clear, if all 15 members still want to speak in favor, they have that right. But from a practical standpoint, after a few unopposed speeches supporting the motion, it's unlikely all of them will find it necessary to continue piling on support. The same is true when many members wish to speak against a motion and they discover no one is speaking in favor of it. Next, all debate is through the chair. When speaking in a meeting, members address all their comments to the chair instead of addressing another member directly. This is because if a member is specifically talking to another member, it can start to feel like a private conversation that excludes the rest of the assembly. This can also lead to other private conversations popping up in the meeting, leading to a breakdown of decorum and order, which results in an unproductive meeting. Remember that what is said in debate is for the benefit of all the members in attendance. This is why all remarks are addressed to the chair. Also, when someone addresses you specifically, you have a natural tendency to want to respond immediately, and even to engage in a dialogue with that person. And if someone is disagreeing with your position, it starts to feel personal if the comments are directed specifically to you. So, a member would not address another member in debate and say, "Bob, you're right about needing to raise money. But you know you aren't going to be able to get volunteers for this. Who's going to want to come out in the snow to wash cars?" Instead, after obtaining the floor, the member would address the chair and say, "Madam President, I agree with the last speaker. A fundraiser is a good idea. But I don't think having a car wash in December will work. It'll be nearly impossible to get volunteers to wash cars in the freezing cold." Next is a rule that must always be strictly enforced. A member cannot speak against another member in debate. Members should always keep in mind that it is the motion that is being debated, not the maker of the motion, and not any member who spoke in favor or against the motion. If the chair hears any derogatory comments made about a member, the chair must immediately interject by saying something like, "The chair will remind the member that any comments against another member are not in order." And if any member uses any derogatory terms in regard to another member, such as lie, liar, or fraud, the chair must immediately interject by saying, for example, "The chair will advise the member that those comments are not in order in debate." Now I'd like to turn to a time-saving mechanism in parliamentary law known as unanimous consent, which all members should be aware of. This is when the chair says, "If there is no objection," then explains what will happen if there's no objection. For example, the chair might say, "If there's no objection, $50 shall be donated to the ABC Foundation." The chair then asks, "Is there any objection?" If no member objects, the chair says, "Since there is no objection, $50 shall be donated to the ABC Foundation." By using unanimous consent in this way, the chair skips the formal steps involved in handling a motion. The principle is that when there's no opposition to taking a certain action or adopting a certain motion, there's no need for the Assembly to take up its time with a formal process. This is a valid method of adopting a motion in parliamentary law because any member has the right to object. So, how does a member object? Well, when the chair says, "Is there any objection?" or at any time when it is clear that the chair is asking for unanimous consent, a member simply says, "Objection," or "I object." A member doesn't need to be recognized to object, and the member doesn't have to provide a reason for objecting. When there is an objection, the chair simply follows the formal process for handling the motion. When a member objects, it isn't necessarily the proposed action or the adoption of the motion that the member is objecting to. The member is simply objecting to skipping the formal steps. Next, I'd like to briefly cover a motion in parliamentary law called previous question, which is sometimes informally referred to as calling the question. This motion is designed to end debate and bring the pending question to an immediate vote, but it is often misused and often misunderstood. There is a misconception that while a motion is being debated, a member can just shout out, "I call the question," or simply "question," and that this brings debate to a halt and forces the chair to put the pending motion to an immediate vote. This is not how the motion works. Let's take a look at some key characteristics of the motion so that we can better understand how it does work. The motion can be made by any member who has the floor. This means that a member can't just shout out previous question. You have to be recognized by the chair before you can make the motion. In other words, it has to be your turn to speak in order for you to move the previous question. Also, the motion previous question requires a second. So if it doesn't receive a second, then it simply dies for lack of a second, and debate continues on the pending motion. Also, the motion previous question is not debatable. So when it is moved and seconded, the chair simply puts it to an immediate vote. And whether it is referred to by its formal name, previous question, or whether a member says, "I move to end debate," or simply says, "Enough talking, let's vote already." In any of these cases, any motion to limit or end debate requires a 2/3 vote for adoption, and the chair should always ensure that the assembly is clear on the effect of adopting such an order. This has been a very quick look at a few of the rules that assist the members in transacting business in a meeting. I encourage you to continue your parliamentary education by taking advantage of the many resources available on our site, including the premium videos and training courses. I hope this helps.